All right, we welcome you to another episode of the Learning Stories podcast. This is a podcast where we interview a diverse set of learners from the 21st century. In each episode of this podcast, we interview a guest who has a story to share about how they acquired a set of skills and knowledge in a creative and innovative manner. In the process, we hope to uncover a new understanding of learning as conceptualized, imagined, and narrated by the guest on our show. Today's guest, Aniket Varankar, is a friend that I met a couple of years ago. He's a UX design professional. Before we jump into this conversation, just a little bit about Aniket and his background. Aniket grew up in Mumbai. He's a CUA certified UX designer with a natural inclination towards designing applications to meet business goals, keeping in mind the technical feasibilities. Between 2007 to 2013, he completed a bachelor's in information technology and a master's of computer applications from universities in India. He started his career as a .NET developer with a healthcare IT solutions firm in Mumbai, but he moved to the niche field of UX back in 2014. He recently completed 10 years in the field of UX design. He has worked on a wide variety of projects, including website and internal systems development for an insurance company in the UAE, tools for measuring oil well performance in the oil and gas industry, and an Android application for educational content consumption. His work on a day to day basis involves understanding customer and client requirements, refining the same, conducting user research, identifying market segments, which lead to defining a persona of relevant users to plan an efficient design strategy. So, as someone that has 10 years of experience in the field of UX design, I think there's a lot we can learn from Aniket's journey. This podcast is also for young IT professionals that are looking to start a career in the field of UX design. Aniket, just to get started, I'm really curious about, before we jump into your education and your experience professionally, I know you grew up in Mumbai. So, what was your experience like growing up in Bombay, and what were some of the things you were interested in while you were at school in Mumbai?
Hey Abhi, thanks a lot for that intro. First of all, uh, like you asked about how it was like in Mumbai. So Mumbai has been my birthplace. Being born and brought up there, the vibe of Mumbai is something different. I think you can relate to it. It's more the pace of Mumbai is difficult to adjust to for the people who come from other parts of India or maybe from other countries as well, right? But Mumbai interestingly teaches you one thing, which is make big out of anything and everything that you've got. So that attitude I think is instilled in every individual that is born and brought up, because Mumbai doesn't stop the pace at what it goes. You just have to adjust to that pace. The Mumbai city won't slow down for you, right? So I think it has played an important role in shaping up me as an individual as well as I grew up, because it taught me things where nothing might be going in your favor, but still you have to make things work. So that's how Mumbai has been for me. And while growing up, I was always a decent student, not below average, but not even like a scholar kind of a kid, right? But I've always been pretty good in my studies. So thankfully, I've never got the bashing around that from my parents. Uh, I was always into sports, and different sports. So cricket is something that I play even now regularly, but there have been various sports that I played throughout my childhood. So I think that has also helped, because again, Mumbai, in terms of infrastructure, it allows you to explore certain different sports as well. One interesting aspect of Mumbai, I think other cities might may or may not have, would be the festivities, right? So it's a huge thing in Mumbai. So basically, recently Ganpati festival is still going on, rather. So that is something which I always am fond of when I talk about Mumbai. So yeah, that's about it.
That's pretty interesting, Ani. I've known you for a long time, and I think we both share that love for the city of Mumbai in general. And I was looking up the definition of UX design, which I know you'll tell me a lot about today. But user experience design, it defines the experience a user would go through when they're interacting with a company, its services, and its products. So when you were talking about Mumbai, I just thought that on a day-to-day basis, the people that stay in the city of Mumbai, they experience so many different products and services, whether it's
Yeah.
how they book a ticket to get on a train, whether it's when they book a cab to get on an Uber, whether they want to buy something during a lunch break. So, in a lot of ways, people in Mumbai, they just grow up getting used to certain experiences as a consumer. And I think with technology coming into play, all of us use apps. Like if you look at my phone or your phone right now, we have so many different apps. And I think it's really interesting to think about the experience or the people that design these apps and what they are thinking when they design it. So I know you're going to throw some light on that, Ani. Like, just on a candid note, I know in your
Yeah.
resume you mentioned that things that you were interested apart from work, you mentioned air crash investigations,
Yeah.
international politics, and you said cricket. But apart from that, were you like curious about computers growing up? When did that interest sort of develop?
That's a very good question. So when I was a kid, computers was not that common at it was not a household thing to have a computer, right? But the place where I stayed, I still remember it was my grandmother's place, and we had a neighbor. I think he was a college student, and that guy had a computer. Like no one else ever had a computer, and the first thing I ever did on a computer was play Prince of Persia. If you remember, that was an old game. So, and I think that was the moment when I actually got hooked up with this machine. Like I ever got to know about what a keyboard is, what a mouse is, what a screen is like. So I think that's when I got hooked up. And like every kid, maybe games was the first interaction and reason behind me liking this overall the machine, right? Yeah, that was how I got introduced to computers. One interesting aspect which you mentioned about design, right? And you just talked about few apps or the way we utilize apps in our normal life. But design and UX is not restricted to just the mobile apps. Rather, it started way back. Uh, an interesting aspect, thanks for the research that you have done, the air crash investigation part, right? So it kind of relates to it. So the first user experience design was ever thought after was for a cockpit of an airplane. So that's how it started and the reason behind it. So if you see a cockpit of an airplane, even now it is very complex. You have a lot of switches, buttons, right? So the first airplane before the user experience design was in place, if you see all the buttons and the placements of the buttons, they were not designed to help the pilot. It was more complicated. So imagine this scenario where you are already flying a complex machine, plus you have to see all the switches in front of you, and now it is rather not helping you fly, it's making your life more difficult to fly. So that's where user experience was first implemented. So even before coming to this era of apps, mobile apps, softwares, this was thought after way before that. So I just wanted to highlight this because nowadays when we talk about UX, it is narrowing down to just mobile apps, whereas that's not the case. When you talk about booking cabs, why just talk about booking cabs as an app? Think about the doors of the cab. That was also a user experience. So
Mhm.
not always the doors opened in a certain way that they are open now. If you a classic example would be if you look at the doors of Rolls Royce, they open in a opposite direction than what normal cars do. Why was it? So those aspects are also user experience. It's just that nowadays it's more relevant to apps because that's how the world is moving towards, right? It is digital world moreover. But a simple door opening or an elevator, all those are user experiences. It has been set, we never observe it because they have been set so precisely that we fail to even notice that it is in place. And that is what user experience. The best user experience is always about you don't notice the design. So that's my perspective about. Hope I answered what you asked for.
No, that's really interesting. Like for someone that's just I have a couple of friends that are in UX design, including you, and you know, very often the first thing that came to my mind is its use in technology. Like you saying that it's applicable across different fields, really opens my mind to think about the its application in different contexts. But Ani, I'm curious about your time in university. Like
Hmm.
once you grew up, I
Yeah.
know from 2007 to about 2013 you first completed a bachelor's in information technology,
Yeah.
master's in computer applications. So, was there a reason you chose these two courses and maybe not something like engineering or, like physics? Like, what
Yeah.
was your thinking behind that? And what were some things you learned in this time that you really hold on to even now?
That's a very good question because I don't think so. Everyone in back at the time when we were discussing or deciding upon our career paths had plans for your future, because we went with that notion where medical and engineering were only the two streams. Like back then, I know today the kids are more open and have more discussions and more avenues to find out new career paths, right? But back then it was either medical or engineering, right? So for me it was clear by the time I completed my 12th that I'm good with technical aspect of things, but I was so sure that my attention span is not that great that I could go through those 4 years of engineering. That was the only reason. And I didn't wanted to, the thing with me was always, if I want to do a certain thing, it would be with that complete attention, right? But I know my limitations as well. If I could dedicate that level of attention to engineering, and the answer was no for me. So I might as well thought, okay, bachelor's of science in IT would be something that I could actually give my 100% to, with my other aspects of playing sports, keeping that alive as well, right? So that was the only reason of going to like bachelor's of science IT and not engineering. Post that, when I was about to complete my IT degree, it all the credit goes to my mother, because she was the one who actually gave me that vision. Okay, just doing bachelor's, is it enough with the competitive world that we were getting into, right? So I was actually dying to get into a job when I was about to complete my bachelor's, right? But that vision which I got from my mother was about, okay, if you leave your studies now, get into a job, do you think will you ever be able to get back to studies, do what is necessary, and then again start working? I don't think so. So which opened my eyes about, yes, she is right, whatever I have to do it now, so that once I get into all this competitive world about earning money and making your life and fortune, I don't think so I would have come back to studies. So that was the reason I went for masters. And doing MCA was a no brainer, because after bachelor's you have either the two options: it is either MSc in IT or MCA. And MCA was a fairly new course at that time. MSc was going on since many years before that. So somehow I thought MCA would be more relevant, because the curriculum that they had listed, that sounded more interesting than what it was in MSc. So that was the like reason behind selecting masters in
Yeah,
computer application.
yeah, but like, I'm curious, Ani, like in that like 6 year period, like for someone that doesn't know like a
Hmm.
BSc in IT, like what are
Hmm.
some courses that you actually take and learn in that 6 year period? So like during BSc IT, like is it a more general introduction or a very focused sort of
Yeah.
course? The MCA phase, what are some courses you take? So if you could break that down across that
Hmm.
period, that would be really interesting to know.
Yes. So BSc IT, I'll explain you in detail as well, but the crux of it, it is a shorter version or a schemed down version of engineering. So it is not as detailed as engineering is, or it is not even that practical as engineering is, but it is a schemed down version of engineering, right? So it would have all your programming languages as subjects, right? Mathematics is one part that would be your subject. Then there would be data models and data sets related subjects, right? You would also have financial planning as a subject. Those are optional, but you can select those for your curriculum as well. uh, Even microprocessors, those become part of your subject. So basically, if engineering as a stream, if you take, you have to select a specialized stream. Let's say someone chooses an IT as an engineering stream, someone chooses a EXTC as one, right? Someone goes for computers. Basically, in BSc IT, you would get all the subjects which are relevant to all of those streams. Essentially, that is for the sake where after 3 years you can actually choose to go in any of these streams, right? So that's why programming languages, processors, data models, financial planning, what
Sorry. It's okay. You can keep going, Aniket.
actually
It's come.
you will edit, right?
One moment. Yeah, yeah.
I got Chirag's call, man.
That's okay.
Sorry for
That's
that.
okay. No, no worries. I'll just cut that part. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, like I said, BSc IT is had subjects like these, and every year, like it is a 3 year course, right? So you start with a certain programming language in first year. So overall, these were the subjects, and as you progress through the years, they go into details of the same subjects. Like your programming language might change. So in first year, if you are learning C as a language, it would go to C sharp or C++ in the next year. Mathematics, if you're learning certain syllabus in first year, it would just detail out in the second and third year. So that's how you progress through the years. Even certain aspects would certain BSc IT courses or colleges would allow you to venture into different topics like nowadays. Okay, back then we had cyber security, which was an optional thing to choose. Nowadays AI is the thing, right? So there are certain optional aspects of the curriculum as well which you have to choose for or go for. So that's about BSc IT. MCA, so interestingly, now MCA has become a 2 year course. When I did, it was a 3 year course because after BSc IT, you go to MCA first year. But then they actually, it was realized that most of the courses or sorry subjects are repeated in MCA. So the people who do BSc IT, when they go to MCA, the first year curriculum is the same. So they have skipped first year for people who have been doing BSc IT. So now you can directly get admission to MCA second year, and it becomes a 2 year course for them. For us, MCA was 3 year back then. First year was same, the similar subjects like coding languages, data model related subjects, even financial planning. Interestingly, we had a foreign language as well as part of MCA. So I had taken French back then. It was thought of as a scoring subject, but yeah, didn't work out for me. But it was a part of that. MCA second and third year becomes challenging a bit because it is more into detail. Now, the practical aspects of things which I spoke about earlier, which was missing in BSc IT, it comes into MCA. So you actually start working on case studies and projects, and that's what makes it more interesting for MCA. The subjects are the same. You still have your coding languages and data modeling subjects, but now what happens is you have to actually implement, build case studies around it, show how they can be implemented in a better way. So these aspects make MCA more like fruitful to the person pursuing it, right? And one another interesting part, MCA being for me, it was 3 years, right? So 6 semesters. Last semester is a compulsory internship. So you have to do an internship. Either you do a project or an internship, but most probably people opt internship because you get brownie points for that as well. So that helped me a lot because thankfully back then I got an internship with a company called Last Bench. So that's one interesting aspect where actually my UX journey started. No one knows about it, but that 6 month period was where the user experience journey started.
Because you did that internship for about six
Six
months, right?
months, yeah.
And that's, I mean, I think, is that something that students do to prepare you for the job market in a way?
So that is one of the reasons, but one major aspect is the course MCA itself is designed in a way where that last 6 months is dedicated to an internship or a project. So you are basically evaluated based on what you did at that internship or what project you undertook and completed, right? So that 6 months, there won't be any lectures, there won't be any classes that would happen in college. You have to basically work out there. And whatever feedback your employer or whoever is giving you internship gives back, you are judged based on that, and your grades in that last semester is based on the work you did, the actual work you did. In a way, you are right. It helps you prepare for the actual world out there where you will be working in a professional setting or an environment.
Yeah, because I think like a lot of us don't realize, like for someone that is in the IT field in general, Ani, based on your experience and looking back, what are some things that students can do when they are at university to make their application seem? Because I know right now you are in a managerial position. You're probably working with new graduates, coming into the company. So, what are some things you look for maybe like a fresher coming out of
Mhm.
college? What can they do to make their application look much better overall?
So that's a great question to put forward, because I'll tell you the difference how it was and how it is now, and then answer your question about what will stand out, right? So when I was going through my academical years, right, the scenario was different. There were IT was a booming field. I would still say it by till 2013, 2014, or 2015, let's say, it was a booming field. So there were jobs available, right? And as you know, India is known as a IT hub for the West as well. So there were many jobs available. So you actually didn't had to do that much to stand out from the others, right? But now what has happened is, as it is, the jobs have gone down. They're still available, but they have gone down, right? Plus, the competition is so much that you find the same amount of resources everywhere in the world. Okay, so what to do in order to stand out, right? First of all the companies or professional employers look for one thing: how ready are you, or how quickly you can be ready to give outputs, right? So when you come in as a fresher in any new setting or a new company, right, they don't want to invest more time in getting you ready to give outputs. And by outputs, I mean valuable outputs which earn them the big bucks, right? So that is their whole point. A classic example would be when I joined my employer in 2013, we had a training period of about 3 to 4 months. So they were okay for us to go through the training and not even give any output for 3, 4 months. Whereas now it is expected that as soon as you are picked up from your college or university, how quickly can you deliver? How quickly can you be a resource on a project, on a live project? So that's the level it has gone to. So what would now coming to the answer? What should they do? So going through your academical syllabus is not going to help you do that. Additional certifications is something that would always come in handy. And by certifications, I just don't mean by having the physical certificate in your hand. How have you learned to implement what you have learned, right? While doing that certification. Mini projects would always help you. Mini case studies would help you. Why? Because that shows that you have actually implemented what you learned. So it can be a very, let's take an example of user experience project. Like someone graduating from a college or a university right now has a case study done around, let's say, how user research is done. Based on user research, what are the design the strategies they could pan out, right? If that is already handy while that person comes in for an interview, I would not even ask him questions. I would look at the case study or the project he has worked on, ask questions relevant to it, and if it is promising enough, he's a go for me, right? So that's what we would look for more than just academics. So anything extra and more practical based would be helpful in my that's my view of it.
Yeah, that's quite interesting to think about because that's a more proactive approach where the candidate is actually coming in with ideas where they've implemented projects that shows that they are more ready to do the same in this work environment as well, right? So
Yeah.
I think projects and are there any like softwares or websites where you think people can host their projects that is, widely accepted?
Yes, I mean there are many platforms like You have Behance as a one of the platforms. Even there are certain portals where actually you can put templates, you can upload templates, and basically templates of designs, right? So, or you can even host. You can rather, nowadays it's more prevalent to have your own portfolio as a website. So Wix provides you that platform where you can actually upload your work, right, as case studies, and that becomes a very, I mean, the impression that you would impart on your employer or some interviewer would be very much helpful for you only, because it's a different way, right? Now, getting resumes in a PDF is a very common thing, right? Whereas if I just have a link, oh, these are the things that you have done, would be amazing to look at. One interesting example, if time permits, I wanted to share. So I came across this one portfolio come resume, which was basically a link shared on a phone. Okay, so imagine it can be shared on your email as well. But the moment you click it on your phone and open it, it opens like an iPhone homepage. Okay, now this is a designer sharing his portfolio. So it opens the moment you click on the link, it is your iPhone homepage. All the apps actually work. Like if you click on the phone app, it will open his contact info. If you go on Safari icon, it will open his website. If you go on the pictures, it will show all the case studies, what he has done, like the UI or the designs that he has created. So now this is mind blowing for someone like me. If I see this, he has gone not like he has gone an extra mile to impress the employer, right? And not just impress. I think it takes efforts to do that. So thinking out of the box is already there. You don't even have to ask that person, oh, can you think out of the box? He's already thinking out of the box. So that is very impressive. So something like these things would always help you stand out from rest of the people.
Some really good actionable ideas there, Andy. Like I know, you started off as a junior unit user experience designer at Citrus Tech. But before we jump into, I know you've been with that
Yeah.
organization for 8, 10 years now. I'm curious about some things you have observed as a user.
Hmm.
Because as someone that is a UX designer, for instance, when a film editor is watching a film, the things that they notice would be very different from when
Yeah.
a normal viewer watches it. So for you, like what are 5 products or services that you think have very good UX design
Hmm.
based on a set of principles? So if you could tell me like 5 products or services that you have used personally
Hmm.
that you think have very good UX design and why you think it's good UX design according to you.
Okay, interesting. Okay, I will give you more examples of products because services and apps are always updating. I will
Sure,
give
and
you
it does
examples of, yeah. Sorry.
can also be like something in the real world,
Yeah,
like a
exactly.
design. Doesn't
Exactly.
have to be for a
Yeah.
website as well.
So I would give you examples of real life products because they would be more relatable as well. And I actually have noticed them while using them. So so this is a very, very weird example, okay? Don't judge me on it. But you remember the old remotes, like TV remotes, okay? And do you see the remotes now? Okay, the difference is visible. The size of it, like the ergonomics of it, the way you hold it, right? Now everything has become slimmer and longer, whereas when it all started it was broader a bit, right? Because there were more buttons onto it. Now both has its pros and cons. Now you have got less buttons for multiple actions, but whereas there were dedicated buttons to all the actions on the older remotes. So that is one of the examples where I would prefer older remotes over newer remotes. So I'll actually, I'm so sorry for this. Now this is one of the remotes. Okay.
Yeah.
Now this is a very small remote. Okay. Now to hold it ergonomically is not a good user experience for me, at least. I prefer,
It's like ergonomics.
so ergonomics, okay. Ergonomics is the way you handle physical things or physical products. So ergonomics is how easier it is to use or to hold, or how, like I said earlier, the less you notice the design is the better it is better, right? So in a way where imagine this mouse again, an ergonomic mouse. So why ergonomic? a simple mouse won't have those grooves to fit my palm. Now, this has been designed to actually fit a human hand. So now, how much ever time I use it, I won't notice it. My fingers won't be in pain or my hand won't pain because it is designed accordingly. So this is ergonomics, right? And hence the reason. Now, is your palm designed to hold a small thing like this, or is it like more of your resting position of your palm is what open always? It's not always like this. So that's the reason what I meant when I said older remotes had better design. Second example would be nowadays. Abhi, you must have noticed all the cars are moving to touchscreen, right? All your interactions or the screen that you have, your infotainment systems, or even the AC controls are getting into or converted into touch panels. Classic mistake. Why? I would tell you. When you're driving, is it easy to feel something and fidget with it, or see something and touch the right spot to increase or decrease the temperature? Now, your attention. What is the important thing when you drive a car?
Mm.
It's to look at the road. You
Yeah.
drive, right?
Yeah.
It is not about touching the screen, fidgeting with it, and trying to find, oh, is the fan control going up or down, whatever it is, right? Whereas with a knob, you just know, turn it, it will, like, you don't even have to look at it. So that is again, though modern design is towards aesthetics, but it is not a better user experience. And
Mm.
if you search on the web, there are articles around this as well. So it is not that they have not noticed it, but they have made a fair trade-off between, aesthetically pleasing versus UX. So that is the reason. So these are two examples on top of my mind. Apart from that, I might have to think what else.
Like something with food, maybe, like a restaurant that you went to that you thought had really good user experience.
So yeah, one interesting part would be the way the tables are placed. I mean, that is also one thing. Generally, I don't notice it, but that was some weird placement of tables that I saw and which made me notice it. So usually, it is pretty evident that there are certain areas marked already in a restaurant. There was this one restaurant where actually the placement of the tables was not even once you entered, it was again turning towards the exit where the placement of the tables were, right? So this placement sometimes feels weird, but then they say that there is a business angle to it. Certain people place it in a certain way because they want the people to stay longer and things like that, which I failed to understand, but that didn't click with me. So yeah, but I won't say that was a bad user experience. It is more of a way of arranging things which I didn't agree of. But yeah, that's not a bad user experience. Yeah, one classic example would be MacBooks. Okay, now uh, the new MacBooks with that touch pad at the top, the strip that you see, right, over the physical buttons for reducing volumes. Again, the same example. So there is a classic saying in user experience field. Okay, uh, memorization, recall versus remember, right? Sorry, recall and remember are the same things. I'm failing to actually tell the term. Recall versus recognize. Okay. So recall is what? Recall is basically your mental model is set. Now with the buttons, you actually are set where to touch. Like I said about the car as well. So MacBooks, when they had physical keys, people didn't have to look. So people using laptops or keyboards for long, their hand is set. They don't look at the keyboard and type, right? So when there were physical buttons, they know which button to click without even looking at that. With the strip, what happened is you can't feel anything on your fingers. There's no mental model set. So that's why you have to always look at those function keys which come up on that strip. Oh, am I tapping on the right key? So now that is a good aesthetical change. It seems fancy, right? But it is not ideally a good user experience. So
Yeah,
these are
maybe.
few examples, yeah.
Yeah, because I had a MacBook before that had that strip, and I barely used that as much, and now the MacBook that I have has like buttons, and I use it a lot more. So I'm able to like really relate to that sort of example in a lot of ways.
And I think you reinforce the same thing that I said. When it is not noticed, it is the best because you started using the same buttons again, but you don't
Yeah,
even notice or you don't even say that is a better design because it is not noticed. Whereas when there was a strip, you didn't use it, right?
correct.
So that and reinforces what I was saying. When it is better design, it just doesn't get noticed.
Yeah, and like hearing you speak, like what I'm getting is that when you are designing something as a UX designer, you need a good balance of innovation but also tradition. In a lot of ways, you have to understand what came before, and you also have to understand where the user is at now, and then design something that meets everything at like a good middle ground. Like is there an app that you've used, like to give a more like easy understandable example for someone that you think has really good UX like right now?
Yes. So I would rather give you a comparison of apps and uh, because that would help people understand why one is better over the other, right? And it's a very generic app, right? So people in India basically for shopping they use all these apps like Flipkart, Myntra, Amazon, right? So now if you just check all the checkout processes of these apps, there are certain apps which directly get into the things that are needed to be done, right? They don't make you go through multiple steps to reach the final output, which is buying. All you care about is buying, right? You want to immediately select your product, buy, check out, pay, and you're done. So Amazon is one which is good with that because their focus is not on the fanciness of the app. They just want people to come there, select, and check out. As soon as the customer pays, it's I'll tell you something which is interesting after this. But as soon as the customer pays, they're done, right? Both the customer is done with what they wanted, the business is done because the person was able to buy off them, right? And nothing else. Whereas if you see Mintra or apps like even Flipkart, they would have multiple steps in between in terms of say let's say showing related items upfront, right? Related items is something which is secondary. I don't want to know it right away. It is something that can come later. So give priority to something which I want to do, which is buy stuff off you, right? So that's one comparison. You should actually check it, like Amazon compared to a Mintra, how easy it is to buy, like complete the process of checking out. So that is one example. And like I said, interesting aspect. So design is always a culmination of three things: business, users, and technology. Okay, so it is that center point or the what you call that golden middle, okay, of these three things. So you can't just satisfy with design, you can't just satisfy a business. That won't work for your user and technology. Similarly, if you just try to satisfy your users with building all the fancy things, right, it is not going to help the business, and the technological implementation would be difficult. And if you just look at the technical implementation to be easy, you won't satisfy your business and people. So it has to be that center point between all these three aspects. So it's business, users, and technology. So think about that while designing, not just one aspect. So yeah.
Yeah, you gave some really, really nice examples there. Like, I think what you mentioned about the car, I think that sort of decision from a designer is so important because it can lead to an accident and someone losing their life, right? So it's such an important sort of design decision. Or even something like those apps. I mean, a lot of these companies have million or billion dollar,
Yeah.
like capitalizations. So a small decision can change maybe revenue in such huge numbers. So you see how a small like the UX decision can affect that in such a large way in the long run. Now, coming to your career, in the field of UX design, I mean, like for someone that doesn't know what UX design is, if you had to give me like a brief couple of lines of what is UX design and
Hmm.
what a UX designer does, how would you maybe explain that to me?
Yeah. One important like whenever someone who is not from the field of user experience, they ask me about what is UX design, the first thing I tell them is UI is not UX. That's the first thing. So don't ever have that misconception that user interface is user experience. So 90% of the people out there, not even just people who are not related to IT, but people who are in IT as well, like coders or maybe testers. Uh, Back then, they had that misconception that user interface is user experience, but which is not the case. Rather, interface is just 10% of what a user experience designer would do. Okay, so that is one classic, what you could say, a takeaway that I would like to give through this in like this discussion that we are having, right? And what a user experience designer does. Okay, so it is all about making sure that what your business side of things is trying to achieve. So for example, if I'm let's say working for a client, what are they trying to sell, or what service are they trying to provide, what is the end goal out of doing this or implementing this particular solution, right? The understanding that is one part of user experience design. Now you got the business side of things, you understood what they're trying to do. Now the you are user experience designers are basically advocates of the users who are going to use that. So you are the first line of contact of this product to the actual users. So before even that gets built, you have to advocate, okay, as a user, I might not need it. I might need something else. I might need something additional. Or this is not the way I would use it. So that is second. But that becomes the most important aspect, being the advocate of the users, right? And then the third aspect would be actually telling your developers and the dev team what you actually need to build, which wherein the UI aspect, the UI guidelines, branding, all that aspect comes in, right? So when I started, now interesting aspect, Abhi, since you asked this, when I started, all this was done by one person. Usually, all this was done by one person, and it was called UX. Like it was generically combined and called as user experience offering. Like one person only does research, one person does the UX strategies, one person, the same person does the UX, like the UI designs, and the same person takes care of telling the dev team about what to do and everything, right? It now the user experience field has evolved so much that there are specialized roles for each of these modules or each of these items that I just listed. Like there is a specialized role as a user experience researcher has become a role. Like there is a designation, or there is a what you say, job opening called user experience researcher. Okay, then there is an opening which is just for visual designer. So visual designer is he would not at all do any user research. He won't go into chalking down any UX strategies. He would just design the screen, how to make it look good, or how to make it look or make it aligned to the brand guidelines that a company might have. That's his role. Then there would be user experience designer who would actually talk to the users, right, and actually uh, convey what the business wants and what the user wants to the BAs, right, to get things done. So there are these roles which are now specialized, whereas when I started, all this was being done by the same person.
Yeah, so in a lot of ways, the field has evolved, and you have people understanding that it's very different from UI. But I'm also getting that there like normally like a tension between UI people and UX people in a lot of projects.
So weirdly, it is not UI people and UX people, but it is user experience designers or UI designers and the developers. So there is a constant uh, tussle between them, just because, see, user experience, the entire field of design is about detail, attention to detail, because that's where they cannot compromise, right? It is about attention to detail. Whereas when it comes to dev teams, they are already burdened with building something which is functional. They have to make the process from step one to step whatever the last step is complete, right? They have to complete that process and implement it. So when it comes to that, for them it is like, oh, the process is running, why do you care about how it looks, right? Whereas for us, it is if it doesn't look the way we want it to look, or just not looks, but that is one example I'm trying to give you. If it doesn't look the way it is looks, your users are not going to like it. So
Mm.
that's the tussle. That's the main point where these two sides actually, sometimes get not into arguments, but into discussions where one has to adjust what can be feasible at this point of time. There are many instances where we have to just agree to the fact that a certain level of attention to detail can be achieved, and we have to let it go for now at least. So yeah, that happens.
Yeah, and I feel like there are also time constraints with projects that you
Yes.
have to consider, and but I feel like communication, collaboration, negotiation, very important skills for UX designers to
Yeah.
have.
And with agile methodology in place, most of the projects follow agile as a way to get things done. So agile is nothing but you take smaller chunks of implementable items and build over it over iterations, right? So with that in place, usually UX takes a second, like a backseat sometimes, because the notion is let's put this forward, we will improve it next time, the user
Right.
experience side of things. So usually that is the aspect, but nowadays it has been observed that people or businesses have actually understood the importance of putting the right user experience in front of their customers before
Mm.
even anything. So times have changed, the outlook has changed towards user experience, so it is becoming more uh, an important aspect. So one interesting thing would be 2013-14, when I started, user experience was looked at as a good to have. If not, it's okay, but good to have kind of a thing. But now user experience designer, or that person responsible, is considered to be the first person to be on the team. So it has changed. So that's the huge shift that I've seen from 2014 to 2024.
Yeah, and I feel like your experience over the last 10 years, you've seen the field evolve. But, one thing I wanted to ask you, because I remember you worked on projects in different countries, like the
Yeah,
UAE, the US, like Canada, and we met in
yeah,
Canada. We're having this conversation across different countries.
yeah.
So, like, I'm curious, like, over this 10-year period, what are some of the projects that you worked on, and how can you explain it to someone in very simple terms, in terms of what you did as a UX designer?
Yeah.
This is also someone that wants to know what they can expect in a career in UX design as well.
Good point. So I work for as you introduced me, you said that I work for a healthcare IT firm, right? So we are majorly into US healthcare. So most of my projects have been, or the clients who I work for are based out of United States. There have been instances where we have also worked for insurance companies in UAE, right? Abu Dhabi to be specific. So, like you said, the interesting aspect of UX is that you get to work on multiple, though it is healthcare, there are multiple different domains, which are subdomains, which are divided into healthcare. Like insurance becomes one domain, your hospitals or EHRs, EMRs, that becomes one part of what you do, right? There are certain government related projects that I've worked on. So actually, kind of creating not just website, but entire process for, let's say, a government website or a government healthcare portal. So that becomes one side of things, right? So these are the different types of project that I've worked on and what you do. So basically, when you travel, when a user experience designer travels, it is usually for interacting with the actual users. That's the major aspect when you travel. Otherwise, unless and until you have that, travels won't happen, because in-person interviews is a thing that is more, you would say, impactful than online interviews. Now, post COVID, things have changed, but before COVID, it was always the case where having in-person interviews was considered more impactful, right? So that is the reason you would travel. Then sometimes you also go for user testing. So basically, you go in an office setting. So let's imagine you went to a insurance company office, right? Now you're building a portal or you're revamping a portal for their employees. So for testing, what you would do is you just go and observe how the employees use their softwares and notice and write it down or track where are they facing difficulties. It's a silent observation. You don't even ask questions. So there are different types of research. One which is you actually interview the person, one where you just observe. You don't even ask, you just see the screen, you see the person using it. Oh, where is he facing an issue? Do you think or notice what is easier to be carried out, right? So certain things you would identify, okay, this process the employee was able to do without any hiccups. You don't need to change that. Why would you change certain things that are working good for the employees, right? So you just observe. So for all these reasons you would travel to client site and everything, right? So that becomes one part of your job description, which is user research, the user testing, etc. Now there are certain times where you actually interview the stakeholders as well. So one of my trips to the US was to interview the stakeholders, not even the end users, but the people who were trying to, or who were the sponsors of a project, just because they wanted to, basically explain us what they're trying to achieve out of doing or building this solution. And all of this depends on how much the client has budget for, right? Like it is ultimately going, it ultimately gets down to economics of it, right? Where if the client is ready for doing all this, you can actually, there is no limit to the research part of user experience. So that is one aspect. Design, like most of us, we consider design being the main part of doing things, but I would say Abhi, it is just 10% of the entire user experience. So design, where you actually go on tools like Figma, on tools like Azure, right, and actually design your screens, that is just 10%. That is not the major chunk. And while doing that, and just not 10%, and it is the easiest part. Difficult part is to actually create your backlog and create your items what you actually need to address, right? That is the most difficult part. Understanding what your user needs or what your business is trying to achieve, that is the difficult part. So designing is, I'm so sure for people who are just starting it would be overwhelming, but once you get into like 2 3 years down the line, it becomes easier for you,
Hmm.
right? So post that, testing your designs. So there are cases where the client would say, okay, we don't want to directly build it. Can you test what you have designed so that we get a real time feedback from our users? So that is also important, and that is also difficult, where you actually take prototypes. So these are not actual softwares, but you build prototypes in tools like Figma, Azure, and there are many more tools. And you give those prototypes to the users, and again you observe, oh, what is working well, what is not working well. Sometimes even ask questions to them, and then redo the designs. So these are some aspects of, or stages of a designing process.
Got it. Like in your career, Ani, was there a time when you went in with an assumption and based on your observation and research, you got something completely different? Like, is there an example of such
Yes,
a
yes, very good question, because okay, this is interesting. So I went to uh, one of our clients, and they are a huge player in the US healthcare market. Okay, uh, and my whole purpose of the visit was doing like user interviews with, and this was a in-house app, not even app. It was a in-house portal that their employees were using. Uh, so I went for an interview with all. So you basically create protocol. Protocol is nothing but a set of questionnaire, a guideline how you will run the interview. Okay. So there are things to ask. You will actually dedicate time for every question or section of questions, right? Because you have to run it in 45 minutes or 1 hour. That you can't take more time because they are also working and everything, right? So everything prepared. Like for me, it was like I'm all set. Okay, everything is prepared. I've left no stone unturned and everything. When I reached there, even the rooms, okay, so you beforehand you actually finalize the room where you will be conducting, where you will be sitting, where the moderator will sit, where the person or the participant will sit. Everything is pre-decided. So when I reached there, one of the weird problems was and that I faced. Now I am new to the place. it's a client office. Now the participant who is actually the employee of the company, for first 20 minutes that person couldn't find the place where the interview was. Now that is weird for you, like someone, third person would feel this is such a naive issue, right? But imagine it is a chaotic situation where your entire research would go for a toss
Yeah.
because you have limited time. You won't, not necessarily that participant will be available again.
Yeah.
Plus there is cost involved. You're going there for just 2 weeks. You might not even have an extra day to accommodate additional participants, right?
Yeah.
So all this was unwarranted back then. Okay, so this is the fun side of thing. Now second aspect, we when we create a participant matrix, so that is nothing but you identify whom to interview, what are their roles, etc., etc., etc. And that was my bad and a learning that I got from that. I never took the age aspect into consideration. Okay, so all the feedbacks that I got, all these participants were over 45 50 years old. So all the
Mm.
feedback I got was the screen, the text size is small, and it had nothing to do with the text size. They were old, so for
Yeah.
them they use their phones as well with the zoom feature on, like iPhones or whatever. So for them it was a age issue that they couldn't see the screens, right? So that was something that I had not warranted for. Again, something I didn't expect to happen, but it happened, right? Then you have to dynamically, you have to on the run change the questions, or ask them about, or rather ask questions relevant to that. Okay, what part of the screen you actually find it difficult to look at, things like that. So all the other questions which we actually wanted to ask were out of the protocol and something else only started. So you have to decide what is a problem and where you want to take the interview to. So that direction you should know. Yeah, that would be the examples of things
Yeah.
not going the way.
I mean, you have to be quite flexible in the moment to actually, change your strategy and also be very open to the kind of client or user you're actually working with, right? In that case, if it was people above 40,
Yeah.
something for that audience was more important than designing a
Yes.
product, right?
Yes, exactly. And I wouldn't just state a problem, because in user experience, this is a one understanding, right? You just don't call out the problems, but you define solutions as well. So
Mm.
when I say dynamically change, flexible, you always have to go with mock interviews. Don't ever go to a user research with just protocols and never conducting any mock interviews. So before you go for an interview, actual interview, make sure you have done 4 to 5 mock interviews with
Got it.
any your colleagues, your friends, whoever it is. Just run through that protocol 4 5 times, so that that protocol becomes second nature to you. And
Got it.
when you face certain unwarranted scenarios, you don't have to look at the protocol because that is set in your mind.
Got it.
You pay attention to the unwarranted side of things.
Yeah, and I know, like, we've been chatting for about an hour just to respect time. And,
Yeah.
like, what I wanted to ask you is, and I think we can have future discussions. And I know Aniket has a profile on LinkedIn. People can follow Aniket on LinkedIn. And if you want more mentorship or guidance, then, reach out to him over there. But I remember reading through your profile, Ani, you have a lot of technologies like Figma
Yeah.
and a couple of things that you listed out. You also mentioned that you are like a CUA certified user experience analyst, right? So for for like a young person coming into the field, what are some technologies they should know? What are some courses they can take?
Hmm.
And maybe what are some books or people that they should look up to or follow to understand this field better?
Yeah, so if I talk about courses, CUA, that is one that I would recommend, which is so there's a organization called HFI, Human Factors International. So they are the ones who provide with CUA certification. CUA is nothing but Certified Usability Analyst. That is one. There are many courses available on plural site and all, which are basics that you can. So don't directly jump into CUA, because that is kind of before doing your schooling diving into post graduation kind of a thing. That would happen if you directly jump to CUA. So just go for these courses available on Plural site, where it talks about UX, basics of UX principles. I think it goes by the same name, basics of UX principles. There's a good book by Don Norman, which is around user experience and principles of UX. So that is one book I would recommend. Um, and if you're already into the field of UX for 1 or 2 years, you can go for CUA, CXA. So after CUA, you can do CXA as well, which is again what HFI provides, right? ICD. So now, so uh, there is one. It is not ICD. I think it is IDC, which is a very good course offered by IIT Mumbai. Now that is, but the only problem with that is it is a full-time course. So if you are a working professional, it is not going to be feasible, right? But it is a very good course to do, or like someone who is trying for getting into the field of design. That's a really good course, right? And technology-wise, there's no technology as such, but more of tools, and design tools change like every 4 or 5 years. So when I started, uh, there was something named as Balsamic for low fidelity designing. Then there was Azure RP, right? That was being used. Then we moved to Sketch, but Sketch was just specific to MacBooks and Mac OS. Then there are multiple like Adobe suite of tools. Like there are many Illustrator and things like that. But nowadays, if I talk about last 2 years and now, it has been Figma. Figma is the widely used tool. So, and I think it will at least go on for a couple of years or more. Like Figma would be the main tool that every design team would use. So, yeah, those are the tools.
Perfect, Ani. And thanks so much for your time, Aniket. I really appreciate you making time for this. For the listeners, if they do want to reach out to you with more questions, is there like a platform that they can reach out to you on, like in
I think
specific?
LinkedIn would be the best platform to reach out. Reach out. Other than that, I am not on any professional platforms as such. But yeah, LinkedIn should be the platform they can reach out.
Perfect. So with this last question, thank you again for listening to this episode of Learning Stories. We will have many more such episodes. Stay in and subscribe to the channel for such interviews. Until next time, stay curious and keep learning.
Thank you.